of Africa who constitute the private sector are grateful to our governments for all of the regs and AU protocols they have signed, including Agenda 2063 and the gift of AfCFTA, which they have given to us. Think of AfCFTA as the only pathway. Think of regs as the only pathway for what we need to transform Africa. If we begin to produce and transform our natural resources to the benefit of the continent, the richest, I believe, continent in the world, we will have no reason, there will be no reason rather for our people to risk their lives at sea. One time I was looking at pictures to see what I had in a relative or friend, and I came across a friend of mine who was at sea and caught up in a camp, I believe it was in either France or Italy or someplace. It should not be happening. It should not be happening. Citizens and private sector must be proactive within the frameworks by not waiting for governments to do everything, else it will not be realized. We tend to wait for government. We're waiting for the government. I've heard this repeatedly in several countries. We're waiting for the government to do things. Education is key, first step. Let's see how we can help the government transform the educational system so that the lives of our best that are abroad can return and help to transform the continent in terms of providing the skill sets needed for the continent. The private sector must, I repeat, the private sector must be in the driver's seat. If I were ever to come back into this life again and got involved in politics, my best friends would be the Chamber of Commerce, labor, civil servants. Those leaders would be my best friends. Why? I would like to hear from them on a regular basis to guide me in formulating policies in the best interests of the country and the people. Private sector proactiveness is the reason we are here. Private sector must play a key role in transforming Africa. Now, we must do this from a standpoint of stakeholder engagement. The stakeholder engagement must comprise the private sector, academia, labor, CSO, and the public sector. It will be a perfect marriage where we just sit and engage transparently in the interests of the country and the interests of the people. APSS is more of a think tank body. It is not about competing or overshadowing the African Business Council. For reference, I nominated the lady who's now president of that organization. For reference, I'm the one who participated in drafting the position paper for the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce when the first set of draft documents was issued for the ABC. ABC is critical because we attempted back in 2009 to have representation at the AAU so that the African leaders will hear directly from the private sector. It did not happen. We pulled together and we have supported the ABC, the establishment of the ABC. I want to thank Dr. Spio Cabral, who he said to me, "Wendell, I'm retired." And I said to him, "No, we have something important to do." And so together, we worked on a document overnight that was presented. That led to establishing a committee that eventually produced what is today the African Business Council. Dr. Spio, thank you. So ABC is our umbrella body for all businesses. And let me challenge every business to give the fullest support to the ABC, the African Business Council. They represent us at the AU. They happen to be the voice of the private sector at the AU. What we're doing here today, okay, we are looking at the enablers. We are looking at the enablers. What are some of the enablers for what we want to do in Africa? You have the protocols, the REX protocols, the AU protocols, and we must say thanks to our professionals at these organizations. It's time that we come in and help them dust off some of those files, some of the works that have been on the shelves for years. Good programs, but they're not being acted upon for a number of reasons. And I think it's critical we look at these things. As a galvanizing stakeholder think tank body, APS Series 2 is themed on awakening Africa's sleeping giants in the implementation of the regional economic communities and the African continental free trade and leveraging strategic opportunities for Africa's turnaround. This here is critical. What are we referring to when we say awakening Africa's sleeping giants? Africa itself, by reference in terms of its resources, is a sleeping giant. Unfortunately, the data we have, they were not designed, they were not developed by us. It is time that Africa develops its own data. It is time we put our universities to work. It is time we know what we have by mapping out the natural resources of the continent. It's critical that we do this at the earliest. Each and every one of us happen to be a sleeping giant. We just have to face the reality of what's around us and move forward to awaken ourselves to act. Ladies and gentlemen, it is important, very important. I'll be out of your faces in a few minutes. It's important that we act, and we act now in the interest of the continent. I mentioned earlier about the movement of people for greener pastures in Europe and the West in general. How do we address this? At some point in time, I recall, and I stand corrected in the figure, the European Union had given us $16 billion for Africa to bring about some remedy to keep its people from migrating to the West. Unfortunately, I'm unable to tell you the status of that $16 billion today. But we have the jobs here. We have the natural resources here on the continent. We have everything here. We have the skill sets here on the continent. We had invited someone who a part of the NASA program. The fiber we use today for internet was developed by an African, a Ghanaian, who will be here, I think today or tomorrow, if not mistaken, Mr. Mensa. We intend to put on our website some of the things that Africans have done, the creation, what they have invented. That's a different subject that will be coming up during the conference. But these are some of the things that we want to do to awaken the consciousness that Africans can deliver. The drugs that we use today for Pfizer, an African took part or led that team. There's quite a bit we can do to transform our continent. My friend from Egypt, when I spoke to him about Mr. Aman, when I spoke to him about this program, he said to me, Wendell, all you're saying, you're right, but there's a critical element that's missing. Where is the role, or what should be the role of the private sector in lifting those people on the fringes of life? And he said to me, let us look at social solidarity and how we can engage the private sector to address this aspect. So that's one of the topic that we'll be discussing here. Africa suffers from the paradox of being the richest, but yet the poorest, and an embarrassment, poorest continent, but yet also an embarrassment to the continent. How do we change this? At the end of this program, we hope to come up with sound resolutions, projects to address some of these issues. We're not politicians. We just want to raise these issues as some of the critical enablers needed to transform the continent. We have Mr. Frank Virginia, who has been working on this for years with respect to gold. There's a gold rush in Africa, except that Africans are not rushing for gold in Africa. It's the fact. There's a gold rush in Africa, but the people rushing for gold in Africa are not Africans. We had a crash in 1987. If that should happen again, what would happen? We had technically, when all of the countries had to shut down in light of the COVID, you had an almost total economic collapse. Others produced money, printed the money. Well, when you print your money, it has less value. These are the practical things that we should look at as Africans, because we can have a strong currency in Africa. We should have to stop kicking the can down the road about common currency. We've been talking about this for years. For years. Where are we today? Are we thinking about the continent? Or are we thinking about our respective countries when it comes to common currency? It is critical that we look at this. It is critical that we start building in our respective countries, those countries that have gold, start building up their own reserves. I'd like to commend the government of Ghana. I heard something along that line recently from the Central Bank of Ghana. I also heard, I know of the situation in Nigeria where they have invested some $240 million in trying to lift the people in the artisanal mining sector. In this country, some 300 million plus is generated by the artisanal miners in terms of taxes for the government in this country. So let me not bore you with some of my critical thinking, but I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and we look forward to a productive, constructive dialogue with positions and projects that we can collectively undertake in the interest of Mother Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddie. That was a gigantic, gastronomical, gut-wrenching, gregarious presentation. You asked the question, what are we doing here? And I was worried what your answer would be. But I think you rightly, appropriately gave us an answer that is no longer about making our people go and seek green pastures elsewhere. It's really about making our pastures green. Thank you for that. That was awesome. Chambers of commerce have an existing footprint that will almost be impossible to recreate. You mentioned them as some of your best friends. This has been a network that we have leveraged to enable this summit to translate into reality. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Clement Amoko, the National, Regional, and Continental Chamber of Commerce, to give us his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, and good morning. The Honorable Deputy Minister for Ministry of Trade and Industry, representing the President of Ghana, Mame Doku Asiamajeyi, my sister, Brother Wendell, Chairman APSS, His Excellency Professor Abdullah Sheikh Ali, who is also the Deputy Minister of Finance for the Federal Government of Somalia, Dr. Eko Sfiugabra, the Council members of GNCCI, I stand on all protocol reserve. I deem it a great privilege to deliver these opening remarks at the second series of the African Private Sector Summit, the APSS, organized through the collaborative efforts of the Association of African University, the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry as the host, and the funding from UNICA. Indeed, today marks yet another landmark event that has brought together distinguished personalities from the public and private sector, including governments, development partners, academia, private and business institutions, to deliberate and formulate solutions and workable activities for the implementation of Regional and Economic Commission and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. On this note, let me commend the chairperson of APSS, Mr. J. Wendell Adi, and his team for his initiative and the enormous support shown from the collaboration institution and distinguished personalities towards this event. It is heartwarming to note that we are living in a dream of creating one African market that delivers real results for the people of Africa and its partners. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa has come a long way in the short time with the commencement of AfCFTA, which has created enormous opportunities for Africa and the rest of the world. The largest free trade area in the world in terms of participation countries since the formation of the World Trade Organization. After 1995, Africa has experienced strong growth and impressive improvement in the social and human development indicators. Over 2/3 of the region's 45 countries recorded 10 or more years of uninterrupted growth. It means that it was very consistent. Over 2/3 of the regions, that's 45, there has been rapid growth in Africa. Africa's trade notably due to the demand from countries like India, China, and recently Turkey, which overtook the advanced economies as Africa's main trading partners. There have also been investments to improve public services, more infrastructure like schools, hospitals, housing, and roads have also been built. In addition, African countries have been consolidating their macroeconomic gains as well as democratic governance. The continent became an important destination for capital flows from both advanced and emerging market economies. A number of frontier market economies in Africa, such as Kenya, Senegal, Zambia, and Ghana, issued Eurobonds and became more closely integrated into global financial markets. The region has more educated population and sharp decline in infant mortality. It also has the highest share of the world of adults in the process of starting and running new businesses. Further, Africa has the younger entrepreneurs than in other developing regions with a median age of 31. Ladies and gentlemen, the private sector plays a leading role in Africa's economy, as Mr. Wendell had explained earlier. As noted by the African Development Bank, the private sector accounts for over 80% of the total production, 2/3 of the total investment, 3/4 of total credit to the economy, as well as provide jobs for about 90% of the employed working age population. Given these contributions, it is imperative that discussions that border on African economy, and for that matter, AfCFTA, should seek to actively engage private sector players in reaching consensus for our shared interests and accelerated growth. Recently, the disruption of opportunities wrought by COVID-19 had exposed the need to reassess strategies critical to building resilience and sustainable economy. In particular, exploring innovative ways of creating a sustaining a conducive business environment that unleashes the full potentials of the private sector as the engine of growth and wealth creating on the continent cannot be overemphasized. Available data shows that inter-Africa trade stands around 13% compared to 60%, 40%, and 30% inter-regional trade that has been achieved by Europe, North America, and Asia respectively. This could be attributed to the number of factors including but not limited to high operational charges, lack of infrastructure, bureaucracy, inefficiency, high transaction costs of moving goods across the border, lack of harmonization within the region, a little or no cooperation between carriers, as in the case of the air cargo. These challenges inhibit the full realization of the benefit of AfCFTA. To paraphrase our Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, he said, President of Ghana, the first president of Ghana, and the famous Pan-African leader, the best way to learn to be a continental free trade area is to be a continental free trade area. The issues of transport and logistics is at its core trade. Without a well-functioning transportation system, goods and services cannot reach consumers. There are ongoing projects to improve the infrastructure along the region's primary transport corridors. we need to commit resources and to further ensure that these projects are timely completed and measures put in place to harmonize the road transport guidelines address corruption. The Sea-Link project, an initiative of FEWASI and a brainchild of GNCCI, is critical to improving trade within ECOWAS sub-region by sea. I encourage the leaders of ECOWAS, national governments, national and regional chambers of commerce and industry, as well as industry giants, to provide financial and technical resources to its fruitful reality. We also need to rethink strategies to developing our railway system, given its unique leverage of getting loads of passengers to their respective destinations. In Europe, for instance, the railway system remains popular, with national governments subsidizing or owning entire network. Although the initial cost is high, public-private partnership, in the case of Africa, can be explored to enhance our transport system for free movement of goods and services across our continent. Finally, we need to increase cooperation between African airlines. The spirit of AfCFTA is togetherness, and we must grow the market together other than opting for rivalry. National governments and private sector players must act in concert to ensure that the airline industry provides a viable alternative for free movement of people, goods, and services. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the message for today is simple. The die has been cast, and this places a responsibility on us to collectively work together to rationalize trade negotiations, reduce the cost of doing business, support industrialization, and stimulate cross-border infrastructure projects under AfCFTA. I cannot overstate how important trade is to Ghana, that is our dear country, but also to the continent Africa, and how close it is linked to our prosperity. The evidence in favor of free trade is irrefutable. It creates jobs, boosts income and prosperity, and puts us on the world market. There's so much gain from advancing the free trade. As a Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we remain committed to providing bespoke business support services to enable the business community thrive. We are proud setting our businessmen and women succeed, and this we would not stop advocating their cause. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me to end my opening remarks with these two quotes. The first is an African proverb which goes like this: the best preparation for tomorrow is to make sure today work is superbly done. The work is superbly done. The second is a quote from Osagifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. The forces that unite us are intrinsic and greater than the superimposed influence that keep us apart. It is my fervent expectation that this summit will deliver solutions and workable activities for the implementation of the Regional and Economic Commission and the African Continental Free Trade that addresses private sector concern and helps deepen inter-Africa trade for our mutual benefit. I wish us all a successful summit, and thank you all for your attention. Akwaba, Wizo, Maraba. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, for those remarks. I kind of think of three words that I can summarize what I think I heard, and I hope I'm not too limiting, but at least I heard continental, I heard collaborative, and I think I heard changes. So I think we have a lot of work on our hands to try and make this continent work going forward. So thank you for those kind remarks, challenging thoughts for us to go forward with. Ghana was particularly selected as host, as the founding nation for Africa's independence, and you rightly cited the founding fathers' sentiments of solidarity, And I think I like his remarks when he said that Africa's independence would remain meaningless unless all of Africa achieves the same. I believe all of Africa is here. For that reason, we have no excuse but to appropriately bring into contention that meaning of our togetherness collaboration, which we heard about, to say, can we come together and make this continent work? So it is with these words that I would like to introduce our address by the Honorable Nana Ama Dukua Asima Ajay. I hope I've said it correctly. We must get together more often so I can learn to say all these names. By the way, you people from this part of the world have much longer names than the part of the world where I come from. My name is Sam. Look at that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You tried. There's been a few times when people attempt trying to call out my names, and there are times when I'm actually surprised how it turns out. So I think you were that close. Congratulations. The chairperson of Africa Private Sector Summit, APSers, Mr. Wendell Adi, HE Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, I hope I got it, Chakwera, President of the Republic of Malawi and the chair of the Southern African Development Community, who's apparently joining us virtually. And I see a former Minister of State, former Minister for Trade and Industry, Dr. Ayekosbi Ogaber. Mr. Clement Amwako, the President of Ghana Chamber of Commerce and Industry, representing the National, Regional, and Continental Chambers. Your Excellencies and highly distinguished panelists, moderators and invited guests, friends in the media, ladies and gentlemen, I deliver this on behalf of the Minister for Trade and Industry, the Honorable Alan Chemating, who was supposed to represent the President, but unfortunately, due to other equally important engagements, he wasn't able to show up. And he tasked that I represent him here and deliver everything he would have been delivering here to the letter. I wish you a good morning. And as he says, let me express my profound gratitude to the chairperson and the executives of the Africa Private Sector Summit for the invitation extended to me to deliver the opening address. Indeed, the organizers could not have selected a more suitable theme for this conference, especially when Africa has taken the bold decision by coming together to establish a single continental market. Let me also extend to you all a very warm welcome to our dear country, Ghana, particularly for the distinguished dignitaries, business leaders, and academics from academia from other sister African countries, as well as the delegations from other regional and continental organizations. Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, the case for an integrated market for Africa has never been in doubt. In spite of the skepticism associated with it, it is a historical fact that the most developed regions of the world are also the regions with the highest levels of market integration. Regrettably, Africa still remains the least integrated region in the world. According to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, about 15% of Africa's total trade, that is exports and imports, occurs within Africa, compared to 67% of Europe, 60% of Asia, and 46% of the Americas. The paradox of Africa being the most richly endowed continent and yet the poorest in terms of development outcomes could partly be attributed to the unfortunate situation of low integral regional trade. Distinguished guests, it is in pursuit of an integrated framework that can significantly increase the level of trade among African countries that in January 2012, the heads of state of the African Union at their annual summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, took a strategic decision to work towards realizing the dream of establishing a single continental market for Africa to boost intra-African trade. Since that decision was adopted, extensive preparations and negotiations were carried out by members of states, finally culminating in the historic AU summit decision in Kigali on March 21st, 2018, which formally concluded the first phase of negotiations for the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. As you may be well aware, the AfCFTA is a single market duty-free, quota-free trading bloc covering the entire African continent with a total population of 1.38 billion and a combined gross domestic product of almost 3.5 trillion US dollars. The AfCFTA is the most significant development in Africa since the establishment of the Organization of African Union in 1963. It is the world's largest free trade area, second only to the World Trade Organization in terms of the number of member states. Indeed, if Africa was a sleeping giant with the AfCFTA, it has awakened with a roar of the pride of African lions. Distinguished guests, the successful implementation of the AfCFTA will bring many benefits to our continent. First, it will increase the level of intra-African trade through better harmonization and coordination of trade within the African continent. It is estimated that intra-African trade will increase by as much as 35 billion US dollars per annum, or 52% by 2022. That's in a couple of months. Secondly, it will address the challenge of small fragmented markets in Africa by creating a single continental market, which will lead to economies of scale. Thirdly, it will add value to Africa's abundant natural resources and promote economic diversification and industrialization. Fourthly, it will promote the development of regional value chains and facilitate cross-border investment in Africa. Fifth, it will open up market access opportunities for small, medium enterprises in Africa on preferential trade terms. Sixth, with a population of 1.38 billion, estimated to reach 2.5 billion by 2050, Africa will be a very attractive destination for foreign direct investment because of its market size, with the potential for joint venture and enhanced local content. Seventh, it will deepen the integration of Africa into global markets through supply chain arrangements and other forms of subcontracting transactions. Eighth, Africa will improve in terms of trade with the rest of the world by earning higher values for its exports through value addition. Ninth, the AfCFTA will enhance benefits to consumers in Africa through lower prices of goods imported from within Africa. And finally, 10th, but not the least, it will significantly increase employment and opportunities in Africa, particularly for the youth and other vulnerable groups. Distinguished guests, before the African Union successfully established the AfCFTA in 2019, when in Niamey, Niger, the AU Heads of State Summit fully endorsed the operational instruments for the AfCFTA, some 4 years earlier, precisely in September 2015, world leaders adopted the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development, which outlined 17 goals. The overarching rationale for these sustainable development goals is to eradicate poverty, protect the planet, and end inequality. Included in the 17 SDGs are the eradication of poverty through inclusive economic growth that provides sustainable jobs and promote equality, infrastructure, investment, sustainable industrial development, integrating small-scale industries into value chains and markets, and then sustainable agriculture. As indicated earlier, the AfCFTA seeks to increase intra-African trade and improve the competitiveness of industries and enterprises operating in Africa. To achieve these objectives, the AfCFTA is not just focused on liberalization of trade in goods, but also services liberalization, trade facilitation, addresses non-tariff barriers to improve access to markets, intellectual property rights, and establishing opportunities in the e-commerce sector. It is obvious that the effective implementation of the AfCFTA can lead to significant progress in the attainment of the SDGs by Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, it is against this background that the role of engineering becomes critical in achieving both the objectives of the AfCFTA and SDGs. The historic milestone of starting AfCFTA trading from 1st January 2021 has ushered in new age of industrialization in Africa, along with its enormous opportunities for engineers to collaborate with policymakers and professionals in developing projects and programs to support the emerging industrial renaissance. Africa is noted for its wealth of natural resources, which require innovative engineering to convert them into commercially consumable products for both domestic and foreign markets. It is therefore a challenge to you, African engineers, to lead this crusade to help Africa reduce its dependence on foreign producers by helping to build the productive capacity of SMEs operating on the continent. In addition, the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted global supply chains, has also imposed both grave challenges on businesses as well as opportunities for exploitation. The lessons learned as a result of the pandemic makes it even more urgent for the continent to collectively harness the talents and ingenuities of her professionals, particularly engineers, to improve in intra-African trade, thereby achieving the goals of African Union Agenda 2063, the Africa we want, and the SDGs. For example, under the Action Plan for Boosting Intra-African Trade, clusters, BIAT clusters, engineers should lead after member states to develop specific interventions, programs, and projects to enhance the capacities of the African countries to trade amongst themselves. Engineers should lead member states to determine the priority actions and complementary measures, particularly in the areas of ports, roads, railways, aviation, communication, and energy that will enable the companies harness benefits from AfCFTA. As I conclude, we in Ghana have worked collaboratively with Ghana Institution of Engineers in developing the National Action Plan for Boosting Intra-African Trade. And I urge members of the Federation of African Engineering Organization to support their respective ministries responsible for the implementation of the AfTA to speed up the process of establishing in the country action plans to improve intra-African trade. I thank you all for your kind attention. God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Madam, for such a sterling presentation on the turnaround strategy for Africa. In my own little professorial work, when a person gives you 10 points on a question, that's a comprehensively answered or responded to articulation. I would have definitely given you 11 out of 10. Well done. That was awesome. Those of us who have followed the recent UN proceedings will agree that there is a shift that's taking place in Africa's positioning as a key player. And those who also listened to His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera will actually agree that he definitely represents a breath of fresh air in challenging and specifying what needs to change at that global level. And as you know it, when people become presidents, that most of us would claim them to be our friends. I'm not joining that bandwagon per se, that he actually is a personal friend. So it is with utter humility that I would like to introduce my friend, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Chakwera, the President of the Republic of Malawi and the current chairperson of SADC, to address the delegates virtually. Please enjoy, my friend. Would someone advise me if we are good to go, our technical team? We good to go? Because we have to hear my friend. 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 Have to hear my friend.
My country in particular, distinguished delegates, leadership of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC. A clear mission to advance regional economic integration among its 16 member states. However, for my country in particular, our sites for economic activity are already set the SADC horizon. This is because this is because sharing SADC. This is because the context of new opportunities emerging through the reality of ratifying African continental free trade. In fact, last week I myself have talked with the Secretary General of the AfCFTA. Distinguished delegates, 3 months ago, Malawi assumed leadership of the Southern African Development Community with a clear mission,
I know I'm going to be famous one day. Starts here. So let me check with the technical team. Have you sorted out the clip, or should I move on? They're ready? Good. Okay, let's go for it.
the clear mission for my country in particular, privilege of chairing SADC in the context of new opportunities emerging through the reality of ratifying African
Who are the sleeping giants? Africa herself is the first sleeping giant. But Africa is not just the land. Africa is the people. And when you talk about that, usually the sleeping giant would not know how much of a giant he or she is if you are asleep. And is first an identity crisis. If you wanted to go by regions, you'll be talking about the SADC you just talked about. You'll be talking about the West African region, and you will be talking about the North African region to an extent. But the one that most people ignore more often than not is the Central African region. The East African region seems to be waking up. All the others are also waking up. But let me say here that for somebody to be asleep, it means he was awake at some point. I will use just one example, since you're a professor. If you talk about education, Africa is actually supposed to be the cradle of civilization, of education, because to begin with, Africa is the one that had the first university that all continents were represented in, which is Sankore University in Timbuktu, right here in West Africa, Mali. However, most people have been made to believe that if we need education, we should go to the West. Whereas, you know, even as far back as 1100, Africa had a university that had 25,000 students. And as at that time, London had only a population of 15,000. So the university alone had, 10,000 more students. Then come to the longest standing educational institution right now that you can talk about. You are talking about the one in Fes, Morocco, Al-Karawi. It's not Oxford, it's not Bologna, but because we are not aware that we have that, we are asleep, because when you're asleep, you don't realize that this is who you are, this is what you have, because your eyes are closed. Can I end on this so that I don't take all the time? You must be asleep to be going for what you already have in your house elsewhere, not only in terms of education. We said this year is the year of fruits and vegetables. Is that not what we say? Now, in terms of fruits, Nigeria alone, because if you're talking of the biggest market, since I want to now zero in, Nigeria alone ends up importing enough orange juice that could have employed 8 million people, youth. Now, if you want to talk about other areas like mangoes, Nigeria, as at 2007, happened to have been the 8th nation in mango production. Is dropped as at 2019 to the 10th. Egypt, that used to be the 10th, is now number 8. And India has done very well. It has 50% of mango production. And you do know one of our friends in South Africa that happened to have been the Director General for Forestry, Fisheries, and Agriculture. And they asked Ghana, for example, to produce enough mangoes to be able to feed the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa itself. Unfortunately, I am ashamed to say that we have not even produced one fruit yet to give, because when you are asleep, you do not know what you have. there is much, much more that we could talk about, because in terms of what you've heard all the speakers say today, there is so much in terms of the arable uncultivated land for the world. As at 2018, it had risen from 60% to 65% for the whole world, because that's, uncultivated. And we keep going, as at, was it last year, we had food import deficit of $18.5 billion. It's unforgivable.
Mr. Ture, as a young upcoming leader, when you hear these statements about the deficits and what's gone wrong on this continent, how does that sit with you?
Yes, thank you very much for that brilliant question. I think I am the average age divided by 2 in this panel. But that's the same thing with the numbers. Africa as a continent, we are made to believe that we have to stick with the financial institutions and financial dealings which are already set by a world without consulting Africa. And this has been the biggest disasters that we young people in the continent will have to leave generations to pay for. When we look at the numbers, we keep borrowing and yet don't multiply. And yet the same numbers that we're talking about cannot be channeled into human development. And that is the threat, that is the fear, and that is the anger and frustration that every African youth today is facing. So we need to have a paradigm shift in the way we deal with the rest of the world, first by looking at partnership. But then, a key important element will be, how do we capitalize on wealth generation within our own environment without destroying it for future generations, but at the same time, have an independent Africa that is fit to produce and distribute for itself evenly. But whenever it comes to the numbers, I am telling you that not just myself, but the 450 plus million youths of the continent are all living in fear of a debt we have to live and pay for, and it has not done anything meaningful to our life and for generations of Africans to come.
Thank you for that. Let me follow up to that with the question, what are you doing as a young leader to change that dynamic? So the blame game is one side of the story, but really what do you feel as young leaders you could do to change that dynamic?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the first important aspect that we need to invest in as young people, and this is what I've been doing for the past 2 years, is to invest in the mindset. It is not all the time the skill set. We have young people that are dynamic and have skills and can change the paradigm. But how do we change in our thoughts and look inward in the continent to make sure that Africa is able to produce for its own? By December around 2019, I was offered a scholarship to go and study abroad. And this is for the young people. I toned this down and said I wanted to remain in Africa, to study in an African university, to study in an African country, to better equip me to build on those bases and understand Africa more, integrate and interact with the young people out here so that we can shape the future that we want. From that day till now, I've engaged thousands of young Africans on dialogues, intergenerational dialogues, to provide a blueprint that we as young people can rely on for the sustainability of our continent.
That's awesome to hear young people who are beginning to think differently, because I think that mind shift is part of what's important for us. I did confirm your name, Mr. Bediako. Enough has been said about Africa's insurmountable resources, the potential that we have, and we have heard that story many, many times. You know, Africa has this, Africa has that. What is standing in our way? What is really blocking the way forward?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this question. First of all, let me thank the African Private Sector Summit for giving us this opportunity for the youth of Africa to be able to voice out and share our opinions as well as our decisions with the elders of Africa. Now back to your question. What is standing in the way of Africans? Africa is standing in the way. We are Africans, and we're standing in our own way. Now, the reason why I say this is when you look around the world, you see different type of black people who have claimed identities of different countries in the world. Hello? Good? So you have the black British, you have the black Americans, you have the Afro-Africans, all sort of black people to add to your identity crisis as we're facing as black people. But yet, we are sitting on the most reserved resources in this world. The question is, how can you be sitting on a gold mine and start looking for the gold? That's the point that makes us stand in our own way as Africans. Because we have everything, but we haven't found the actual solution to be able to turn these things into wealth. And that is industrialization. Every continent on this planet that has become a success or gained a successful story have industrialized their country, their continent, and their people. So to touch on what Osman said, you know, human development is very important. Whenever you add something to the mindset, you are changing a nation. One man cannot change a nation, but one man can impact the heart of a nation to change the nation. And so we are talking about education in Africa, and we've only based it on academic resources. When we have to educate ourselves about our own resources, I mean, I'm going to give you one example. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to share this one example with you guys. When I started my business, and I've been doing business from the age of 16, I had to separate it from my academic education completely, because I realized that the people who were teaching me in school were teaching me about other people's history and teaching me about geography that I didn't know what I was going to do with it. They were teaching me science and other stuff, but I was not ready to be a doctor. And all of these things were just kind of scattering all in my head. So I concentrated on my business separately. Now, over the years, I realized one thing, that the same thing that I had to change my mind on is the same thing that is affecting the youth who are coming up. The education that they are having is diverting them to a different place. So everybody in Africa doesn't have the hope to become a successful person because they have been convinced to have an education that will give them a good job one day. What if we started educating our kids to become a businessman or an entrepreneur right from the get-go? Now, this is what I call education. If we give this opportunity to the youth of Africa today, which is 60% of the population of Africa, we would have the strongest arm, the strongest labor, the strongest entrepreneurs, the strongest industrialists
to be able to industrialize our own resources and create the wealth that we need, so we don't go back out there to beg the World Bank and the IMFs and to beg them for money so we can build our roads. The money is right here. The resources are right here. The human capacity is right here. And Africa, if you don't mind getting out of the way for this youth to build a new Africa, please, we're here to do it. Thank you.
Is that better if we use this mic? Are you hearing us better, or can you hear me fine on this mic? You can hear me? All right, that's good. So Dr. Abu, Mr. Dangote, who was supposed to be here, or a representative, he's on a project, a 650,000 barrel per day integrated oil refinery near Lagos, which is a part of a project that will really turn around the fortunes, hopefully, of Nigeria, if not the rest of the continent. It's a 1,100,000 kilometer pipeline infrastructure. Apparently, it's going to be one of those designed to process 3 billion standard cubic foot of gas. I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. My question to you, as a seasoned economist and leader on the continent, what are the kinds of projects that we really need on this continent if we are going to see a turnaround?
Thank you very much for that brilliant question. Let me begin by congratulating Mr. Aliko Dangote for that wonderful project. And I am also believing and hoping that the people who will be running that project are Africans and youth like these ones. Why am I saying that? One of the challenges we've had in Africa is that we give more attention to infrastructural projects, which are important, without first dealing with the mental infrastructure. Because the people who are going to manage the infrastructure have to have, first of all, a reconstruction of their mental infrastructure. I like what the young man said concerning the aspect of education. And if you permit, that is one of the mega projects we need. What is education? The word education comes from the Latin word educo. And for those of you that know the Greek, the e from Latin is from ek, and it means out. And duko, to draw. So drawing out the best from every man for the benefit of his environment and his society is what is called education. And permit me to say, most people here, were not properly educated, including me. It's over the time period that we have to relearn. After unlearning, learning and relearning. So you learned, you had to unlearn, and then you relearn. Because at the end of the day, education is not about all that people have been saying. Literacy is just ability to read and write. Numeracy is just ability to crunch numbers. But education is the ability to live life to the full and make life better for everyone you come in contact with. So that becomes the first, thing I would say we need as a mega project. Proper education. Right. And I like what, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere did in Tanzania, where he sent all the professors back to the villages to go and learn from their elders in the villages, so that they would then come and develop curriculum that would have indigenous education. Because if we do not develop our own indigenous educational system, we will not have education that is helping us with indigenous technology, indigenous science, indigenous economic processes, because
We have even judicial processes like in Rwanda, the gacaca courts. Yeah. So all these things can be done easily. Finally, so I don't take all the time. If you want to really do something beyond the initial education, I've heard these young men, and I'm really happy to have you here. Speak now and talk of the aspect of entrepreneurs. Let's have empowerment centers that are integrated with all the stakeholders contributing. That means from now on, every father, mother, parents should raise children with a vision to change Africa by helping them to have confidence in themselves, not always looking at any color of skin or anything else. Then if it came to the aspect of what they believe about themselves, let them know they are the best, because everyone is the best. Out of 6 billion possible human beings, when your father met your mother, according to science in 1986, there were 6 billion spermatozoa in the pool of sperms. Now, out of 6 billion, 5,999,999,999 others were flushed out. Only you made it out. So you are already a leader. You are a champion. You will make it. You have made it. So if we could do that, it will help the way our children think. Then when it comes to the aspect of governance, let it be evident that everyone is supposed to have been properly trained to be a political leader, and let's stop doing it with political parties. Let's go to the place where everyone now comes because they were chosen as the best representative of their families. From the families, they now come to representatives of the wards and all of that until you get to the national level. So that just like you do currently in political parties, where it is actually ward elders or leaders that are the delegates that elect. Let's have delegates at all levels that elect not on political party basis, because partisan politics is too costly. It has not helped us. Let's go back to the original for Africa. Let me stop here for now. Thank you.
Sir. Thank you. Thank you. I do have online the Minister of Mauritius with us. And the question I want to pose to her is, given some of what we are experiencing on this continent from a project viewpoint, Egypt's new capital, 45 kilometers from Cairo. We have Kenya's Kanza technology, which is a 14.5 billion development, or which has been modeled around the US Silicon Valley concept. You have the Motorfontaine city that's dubbed to become one of the biggest, greatest business ventures in South Africa. It's an 8 billion venture project. And all of these developments, again, what you find is that they're all foreign funded. How do we stop that trend? Is she able to join us? Is she on? Can she hear us? Is she able to engage the minister online? So while you're getting her on, let me, she's on? Okay. Maybe I'm lost in translation. This, where I come from, means good, she's coming on. Or are you saying carry on because she's not coming on? I just need to know what you mean. The other day, the taxi driver said, "Are you happy?" And he said, "Yeah," but I could see he was not happy. Okay. she's not coming on. So let me get Dr. Abu to answer, and then Mr. Bediako, if you can also come in on that question. You know, look at these. How do we stop funding from outside so that these projects that look so amazing, if you look at the billions here, I mean 45, 14, 8, and so forth, most of that is foreign funding. How do we, you said we're sitting on a minefield, how do we stop foreign funding or reliance on it?
Okay. First, what's the most important resource in any nation? The human resource, the people. We said Africa has 1.3 billion people. How did Ethiopia build her dam? From Ethiopians, no foreign funding. The expansion of the Suez Canal for Egypt, how did they do it? From their people. Let me give me any nation you want us to use as an example, just any. Ghana. Okay, since we're in Ghana. We have a population of 30 million people. In terms of those that could afford just averagely, meaning there could be some people who can even contribute $1,000, but let's say afford $100 each. If we said it's just 15 million, and we took the 15 million and collected $100 each, that's $1.5 billion. Now, if we did it monthly, and I'm saying that because I know there are some people, if they knew that we would not end up embezzling the money, we would truly utilize it for the purpose that we're taking it. Some people will give even 5,000 or 10,000 a month. So when you average it out at 100, 1.5 billion, right, times 12, what you are saying is $18 billion. Would that do something? Thank you.
Thank you. So I have some different types of analysis why foreigners are investing in Africa. And these are economical analysis. So let's just go back to the shambles that our economies are facing in Africa. And let's break it down. We have 92% of exportation in everything we use in Africa. 92% of it, it's being imported, okay? Sorry, thank you for correcting me. Now, this importation, I would like to break it down how it's done, why our governments are crying. So, somebody works so hard, gather the money, and flies to China. When he gets there, he pays for his hotel. He pays for his transportation. Then he invests the money in a manufacturer that is in China, so he can get some goods to bring it to Africa and sell. When he brings the goods back to Africa, the government of Africa charges him with a tax and a duty of 50% of the value of what he has just gone to invest to bring it into the country. This trader, this businessman is half angry already because he's paid for it and he's come to pay another 50% of the value just to get it into the country. So guess what he does? He sells it times 5 or times 10 the price he bought it for. Then when he collects all this money again, he puts it together, change it into foreign currency, off he goes again. So these people in the Western world are sitting there, and Africans are bringing bundles of money. Bundles of money. So if these Westerners were monkeys in the jungle who are looking for bananas, they would simply know that the bananas are in Africa, so let's go there. The reason why everybody brings their investment into Africa. And when they come, who do they go to? They don't go to the person that gather the money to come and buy the product from the manufacturer, they go straight to the government, which means the investors are coming on top of our countries. They are not coming into our countries. Because if they were investing within the countries, the manufacturer would probably become a partner to the trader, and business can be subsidized. Instead of importation, there will be more exportation and internal production. But in this case, this is not what is happening. There are a lot of investment coming into African countries that only end up with extraction. This is killing our economies. This is killing our GDPs. We say we turn over $57 billion in a country like Ghana when we have almost 30 million population. Now, this 30 million people, like you were talking about your 18 billion analysis, I just want to give this analysis. This 30 million people, in one of just the governmental productions of the country, which is a national demand, that's energy, electricity. When I average just 10 million people out of these 30 million people who are paying 100 to 200 cedis a month, okay, these 2 million people, 10 million people are generating 20 billion cedis, which is $4 billion. One entity generates $4 billion in a month. There must be something that the state is not doing properly with these revenues that is coming from the citizens, from the countries. We haven't talked about the taxes. We haven't talked about water bill. We haven't talked about all the bills. So if we have all these billions circulating in our system, then why do we go out there going to borrow 1 billion or 900 million? This is a question mark that we have to ask ourselves. Why are people investing in our countries? How come we, the Africans, are not investing? Dangote is one of the billionaires that have been generated out of Africa's economy. And I'm telling you, even a kid in Somalia know his name, because we only have 1 or 2 of them. So it's made him the most popular billionaire in Africa. I believe that if we change our mindset of investment and development, Africa would generate a lot more billionaires. And when you have a lot more billionaires in your economy, trust me, you don't need to borrow money. The money circulates in the system. There's more employment, there's more life, and there's better life. Thank you.
Osman, thank you so much for that. Osman, as a young leader, when you hear that and see that Africa's infrastructure is kind of outmoded, our cities are congested, the homes we live in are poorly designed, the informal trading system does not really make people thrive as much as they could. What goes through your mind as a young leader to say, what could you offer this continent as a solution to overcome some of these hydras that are holding us back in terms of really having a breakthrough?
Yeah, thank you so much for that brilliant question. But first, I just want to say this thing about foreign investment in Africa. Yes. One thing that is certain is, you see, it is easier to mismanage money or funds that are borrowed or comes in grant than funds that are mobilized by grassroots individuals. Yeah. If we have a common project here and all of us put in $1, we will all go back home keeping track of where our $1 is going. And that doesn't make politicians comfortable. So that is a no-go area for many governments in the continent. Now, when it comes to the infrastructure in Africa, we have to understand that we cannot get the world work for the continent, as in my friend's words, unless and until we have the infrastructure that attracts them to work and get something remaining. The poor infrastructure is what enables capital flights and direct investment occurring within Africa. Because in most instances today, when we look at the logistics, for instance, how many of our big businesses, the likes of Dangote, who invest a lot on distribution, will tell you that in many African society today, the Dangote group cannot operate as a result of poor logistic, poor infrastructure, and not having the ability to negotiate or making it easy by African governments for their projects or their company to reach. Now, we cannot talk about regional integration if we do not build the infrastructure across the continent. The Gambia, where I am from, is just about 2 million people. We are one of the smallest markets in the world. How do we expect the Gambia to produce and grow if an infrastructure is not built for Gambians to integrate and interact and do business with Ghanaians, Nigerians, and other parts of the continent? Another good example is Rwanda today is seen as one of the fastest growing economies in the world. In the top 10, Rwanda is there. In terms of size in the economy, is around 143 out of 193. That is the disaster that occurs because there is no common market across the continent. So these are things that we, the youths, of course, find very difficult to comprehend. And this is what I believe could be our solution. That with the big entrepreneurs that we have there, the big business and developers, the Dangotes, my friend here, Freedom, and the list goes on. There are so many Africans who need to rethink about investment in the continent. Instead of hoarding and hiding our money outside of the continent, we have to come, have trust in the youths, invest in the skills, and influence our governments to forcefully put the enabling grounds so that we can integrate. It doesn't matter if I walk across the continent. As I told you, I've traveled a lot and so many countries in Africa now. And all I see is brothers and sisters hungry of skills. I've seen youths building and making doors, gates in Nigeria, in the province of Nigeria, where we import them from China and Dubai, in the Gambia. This is the problem. And we cannot enhance this unless and until an infrastructure is built to put all of us together. And that is what we need to invest in now as a continent.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Now, you brought the Rwanda story, but I want to ask the minister, if she's still online, to say, like Rwanda is always highlighted as an example or sterling example of success in Africa, and why is it just, it's one country out of many that are not there? You know, these days it's copy and paste, right? That's how we do most things. So why is it that we have far too in between success stories when we could really find a system maybe that works and replicate it across the board? Why is this Rwandan success story so isolated? If you can respond to us, Minister. Okay, looks like we're still having that technicality. Let me know if you're able to come through. Rwanda, why don't we have many examples of success stories on the continent?
Thank you very much. I think the challenge we have is that most of the time we are thinking in terms of, like you said, copying and pasting. As against what is, if you permit me to call it, the redemptive
gift redemptive contribution. And when I say redemptive, something that would take people out of their bondage. So the continent of Africa, every nation has something unique that is supposed to be contributed to the rest. Meaning, if, for example, what you just gave, the example of, Rwanda, we have seen something that became their own contribution to the rest of the continent. We take that and multiply. But we don't stop there. We look for what is also unique to Ghana. And all of Africa comes together to help Ghana to multiply it, and we go and use it. But if you permit me, let me latch that onto what you had asked earlier concerning Dangote. Why are we not having so many Dangotes? Because somebody like, Additional, Akiumi Additional, for those of you from Nigeria, happened to have believed in Dangote as the Minister of Agriculture that time. Now he is the President of the African Development Bank. And he said, now that you've come to see me in my office, I challenge you to do something in Nigeria that would challenge everything else around the world, and we will support you. And with the support of the president then, Obasanjo, they ended up being able to raise at Dangote. Because without the necessary support, political will, political support, because let me ask the question, how come in Ghana, for example, the export-free zone, you have 10 years tax holiday, true or false? And after the 10 years, you are not allowed to tax them more than 15%. Chamber of Commerce, is that what they give you? No. So how are you going to, are we talking about magic? No kingdom is run by miracles. Every kingdom is run on systems. So structures must be run with systems that operate the structures, and there must be understanding of the laws that govern the operations of the systems, and there must be principles that everybody is guided by that now undergird the laws that now run the systems that operate the structures. Until we get to that clear understanding and have, open face kind of interaction where we say, like the young man was talking about, governments, okay, just like I said concerning the 18 billion, if you're going to do anything, let's do it for the benefit of everybody. That will be more than enough anyway. It's just that there is a poverty mentality. Poverty mentality is not lack of money in your pocket. And I want to end with that. If I gave this bottle of water to you and to another person, and you have a rich man's mentality, and I said, please give it to somebody who needs it now. You will give it because you know you will always get another. But if you have a poverty mentality, you say, I don't know where the next one is going to come from. I'm going to hold it. And that is what has caused people to embezzle funds where they're supposed to have a release for the common good, because there will be more than enough for everyone in the common pot. So, in summary, the way we'll be able to have many more Rwandas is leadership. Leadership that has vision. And until we have visionary leaders as ministers, I have said that if I am to advise any president, and I've been privileged to advise quite a few, I say if you are going to have any minister of finance, thank God for the one that is right there from Somalia, and you want to have any minister of education and any of the strategic ministries, you must have one that is a visionary leader that will be in his own rights as though he were the president. If you don't do that, forget it. We're not going anywhere. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for those for those sentiments. Mr. Reddy is online. If we can come to you at this stage. So as someone who is established on the continent in terms of doing business, what would you say has been your greatest frustration, and how do you envisage overcoming it? Overcoming it. Overcoming it.
He wants you to come again.
Come again? What has been the greatest frustration as a business person that you have faced on the continent, and how have you overcome it? I saw he was beamed earlier on. I suppose he can hear me. Are we good, technical team? Okay, we're not. Okay, we're not. Okay, we're not. Okay, we're not. Okay, people virtually until you sort out this, because otherwise we're not gonna be good friends. So let me come to this story, Mr. Bediako. Does democracy work in Africa?
It's a great question. I might have a few meanings for democracy. I don't know if it's a demonstration of craziness or if it's a demonstration of human capitalization. But one thing I know for sure is that we are Africans and we need to rely on our culture and believe in our traditional ways of building our countries. You know, helping our citizens, the nation, to come up. We are sitting here depending on a Western constitution to be able to govern the entire continent. Now, once I was studying the democracy and I figured out something that is very funny I'm going to share with you guys. I realized that when a president in America wants to campaign, the public actually donate something to him so he can campaign and become a president. When a president in Africa with the same democratic rules wants to become a president, he goes to the public and bribe them so they can vote for him. So now, I don't know if I should call the democracy in Africa, if I should spell it backwards, because I see it completely different. The system of how democracy works in the Western, I don't think is the same way that it works here. Because I believe that a president is supposed to build the nation and protect the citizen. That's the government. He should not protect the chair that he's sitting on. This system is designed in such a way that our leaders come to power and they protect the chair they're sitting on and count the years that they have to be sitting on that chair. What kind of king has his own time to jump out of his reign? And then all his duty in time of his reign is to protect the chair he's sitting on. I personally think that this will not benefit us. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to be a small god to change the democratic constituency that has taken over Africa overnight. But one thing that I will advise Africans and the leaders of Africa is that let's start to change the narrative of our political ambition. Let's change the narrative to suit our nation. Let's do something for the world, for the Westerners to also see that we are self-made, industrialized leaders. Dubai, Emirates, they have done that. They have their sheikhs. They're very much well respected. Okay, when you go to Asia, I mean, the current president of China, for me, is a complete dictator. Okay, and he works for China, and he's helping the economy. He's actually sustaining their people. You know, we need to go back to the leaders of Africa like Kwame Nkrumah, like the Patrice Lumumba, like, you know, you're talking of Haile Selassie, people that had something in them for their people. They lived for their people. They lived for their country. They believe that them being a leader is only because they've been chosen and appointed to lead a nation, not the sort of leadership that you're being supported by some Western entity, giving you 50 million or 100 million to become a president, and after that, you need to give them you do some favors back for them, and so you give your whole state resources to these people, and they come and extract it. This is what we call democracy in Africa, and when I look at it from this angle, I see it as a demonstration of craziness. We, the youth, want to change. We want a change that will impact the life of the youth who are coming, and generations after generations. For the sake of our children's children, we want a better life for them, and we want to protect our resources and manufacture them, industrialize them.
Right. Thank you. Usman, when the chance comes your way, if you were to become president of Gambia, what would you change?
Thank you so much for that question. And the Gambia is actually going on elections on the 4th of December. So I'm not sure if...
Are you in the running?
So I'm not sure if this is a good question to answer. Yeah, but thank you so much. And it will be basically to invest in the education. And if I can change the way we think about leadership, of course, that will be my entry point. And I would like this to be an agenda before all those things come into being. I'm not even sure if it will ever happen, but this is something that I've taken upon myself, that in the continent, our belief, the notion that we have about leadership must change in order for us to strive and move ahead as young people and as a continent. But I just want to say this thing about democracy as before I forget. It is important for us to know that if we cannot define democracy ourselves as a continent, then therefore we are not ready to embrace it as an ideology. And this is the confusion that Africa as a continent have been undergoing. From independence to date, some countries were just angry with the British and said no to democracy. And then they face the Russians, the USSR then. Some were influenced by the Maos with the Chinese Revolution. And all these ideologies seems not to be able to fix the problem for Africa. Yeah. In 1992, Francis Fukuyama wrote a book, The End of History and the Last Man, prophesies that the future of the world is just democracy and no other ideology will ever work for leadership because the rest have failed. The important thing and why I am bringing this is we have for so long been trapped in these ideologies that one has to be democratic or one has to be communist or one has to be socialist. But the fact is none of this is built with the reality of the African continent. Oh, yeah. And Nkrumah did the best by rethinking about socialism in an African perspective. His colleagues Nyerere in Tanzania did the same thing. African socialism, how will the Ujamaa, for instance, in Tanzania works? So in terms of leadership and politics, we must understand that are we embracing democracy because we just want to make noise? Or are we embracing it because we want practical shift in the continent for the better good of generations to come? And it is not about the elections that keep killing innocent lives every year. In every African country, once they confirm a date for elections, know that the statistics will come out, either officials or unofficial, of sometimes hundreds or even thousands of people who just have to die because a new president is to come. This doesn't make sense. And that must change for us to know that it is not about the conflict, it is not about the difference in ideology, but the common goal that we all share, and that is building a continent that can rely on its own for leadership, for economic growth, and a social cohesion that is going to enable the unity, because without that, there is no Africa.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm gonna take 2 questions from the audience, and if you're going to ask a question, you've got exactly 1 minute to ask the question. And I'm going to give, we're supposed to have President Obasanjo with us. I had a good question for him, but because he's not here, I'm gonna give that question to Dr. Abu to think about as I take 2 questions from the audience. And the question is, what role should former heads of state actively play in the continuing development of Africa so that they just don't go into retirement and come to conferences like this? That's a question I was going to ask him. So let me ask you to think about that question, and then I'll take 2 questions from the audience, one from a male and the other from, so I saw your hand, ma'am, and then I see your hand, sir. So those are the 2 questions I will take. And if we can hand them the mic to ask the questions, please. I'll start with the lady. Okay, go ahead. You've got a minute.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Reverend Dr. Nanaya Owusu-Prempeh. I'm here to represent the women. As you are having this in Ghana, Mr. Moderator, I don't know if you are aware that for the past few weeks, Ghana is going through a dilemma which should not even exist about the LGBTQI+++. When my brother Freedom, Mr. Bediako, was speaking, I thought he was going to hit on that. But you see, we can never say this is not the best place to talk about that, because we're talking about Africa. And when something hits Ghana, it's gonna hit Nigeria, it's gonna hit the Gambia, it's gonna go on and on. So you cannot say, oh, this is not in my country, so I'm not concerned. I want to know what our African leaders are looking for. Why they make room, make it even a discussion, when we are saying that we want development and we want to indulge in something that brings shame and discontinues development. Because at a point in our lives, when we are dead and gone, I'm ending. When we are dead and gone, there may be people who will not speak because of stigmatization. I want to know, we are all leaders here, at least most of us are leaders here, but it's not everyone who has the opportunity to make a decision because we are not at the decision-making level. What is the contribution that we can bring on board that is going to challenge the decision makers? That some issues cannot even be discussed, let alone demonstrated on. So please, African women, we struggle to have babies. It's not easy. So help us so that we can get babies who are going to continue the legacy of having babies, but not ending childbirth. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't know, who do you want to answer that question? Okay, panelists, maybe Dr. Abu and whoever feels free.
Wow. Well, I mean, I heard my name, Freedom. I believe that freedom is more powerful than money. It's more powerful than the things that we chase in life. But sometimes I ask myself a question, what is life? This is a question that has 6 answers. And if you find the 6 answers, you have another 6 and another 6 and another 6. It never ends. So you don't really understand what life is. It's the definition of insanity. Now, talking about what our dear sister or mother just spoke about, yes,
I understand the pain of a woman. 9 months is not an easy time to carry a child in your stomach and deliver them. And that child is supposed to honor their parents. However, this world has become a trick to us. We couldn't make the best out of the world. The world has turned around and made the best out of us. Our children have become valueless. Some of them have become hopeless. Some of them are becoming useless. Everything is becoming so less that myself, I'm becoming speechless about what I want to tell you. You know, that I don't truly know what LBGTC, whatever it is. I don't know. I never found out about it. And I also don't agree with everything that one would say about this entity. But neither do I want to be the one that judges this entity. Because I've realized that there's so many entities in this country that from nowhere, that they rise up from nowhere, and they are causing something in our societies. We have to fight it. One thing that I would say about this is that we have to remember that we were born into problems. The people that become the best in this world are the people that find solutions to problems. It's not the people that complain about the problems. So whatever solutions that we are finding as Africans to be able to change this scenario and this situation would not just come from freedom. If it was just left with freedom, then everybody is free to do what they want to do. That's what I'm probably preaching. But there is a way that we have to start raising our children and educating our children for us to be able to stay away from some of these things that is deteriorating our people, if that's how we see it. And this is something that is already been westernized. All these gays and lesbians and all of this, it's become a lifestyle that some presidents have accepted it in their countries already. In fact, some ministers have been caught with family and still being gays. But I'm in this world not to judge people. I'm in this world to make sure there is justification and equality in living in human rights. And I pray that every one of the citizens or the people of Africa rather find a way to become successful so they can add value to society more so than taking value from society. Because for me, what I've been seeing so far is that Africans have been stripped of every single value, and that's what is bringing corruption. So my advice is we should not depend on our nationalities. We should depend on our mentality, and it should be one. Thank you.
I know this is a huge issue, so maybe if there's time to discuss it, deliberate it separately, we could, in the program. But let me go to the question on the, and then we're gonna stop. Yeah.
Please, I would have loved Dr. Abu's response. My father, Dr. Abu, I would have loved his response if you don't mind. Thank you.
All right. Actually, my response is very simple. I have had these similar kinds of situations where at some point, a former president of the US and one of the well-known people in CNN were supposed to be debating this question about same-sex marriage. And I said, honestly, if you want to hear from me, I don't believe even the proponents believe in same-sex marriage. Because if two males are to marry, one has to become a woman before they get married. If two females are going to get married, one has to become the man in the relationship before they get married. There is the whole concept of design that is the one that defines the purpose. If the designer of man and woman said that's the way he wants them to operate for reproduction, then we better try and look at it from that perspective. We're not going to force people, but when you have laws in any nation
those laws are supposed to be adhered to. And up till today, 36 African nations do not accept that LGBTQIA++. So that is one thing that we need to look at. And we should remember that actually, just like, Kenyatta said to his brother, half-brother, Obama, you probably have already developed to a place where now your problem is LGBTQIA, whatever. We are trying to develop. So when it becomes important for us to put on the table for discussion, we'll discuss that. For now, let's face the things that are most important to us. So if you want to hear from me, that's what I would say, and that, as long as it remains law. By the way, the Nigeria you mentioned, Nigeria has a legislation against it. Uganda has a legislation against it. But I'm not going to go into all the details of that. I just wanted to say, until Ghana has also realized that that's the most important priority, let's put it on the back burner, not to ignore it. We say, if we need to uphold the laws, let's uphold the law. When it becomes necessary to discuss it later, we will discuss it. Thank you.
I've run out of time, so because I had already pointed out the gentleman in the front to ask his question, I'll allow him, and then we're going to break.
Sam, can I just say, I'm sorry, can I just say, just appeal for tolerance, knowing that this is not a national meeting. Let us not bring in issues that cannot be discussed dispassionately, because this is a UN-EU forum. It is continental. I understand all of this stuff, but we cannot efficiently talk about this. And my brother said it, if it's not important, why are we talking about it? If you say it's not important, let us go to another issue, please. Let us focus on CFTA because it's not important. If it is important, then let us open it and change the theme of the conference. And then it's kind of a contradiction. We say it's not important, but we've been speaking about it for the past 20 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adiemi. So your question?
Okay. My name is Frank Dixon Mujeni. I'll be speaking later on in the week. Thank you so much. And my question is in relation to what is happening in this discussion. Because as the young men have just said, most of the ideologies, the schools of thoughts, and everything we have embraced actually has been brought to us as Africans. You have talked about learning and relearning. You have referred to Julius Nyerere in Jama and everything. And we are still not having an African school of thought in terms of development, economically, socially, and otherwise. Do the young people and the businessmen who have just who made it, and they're young and they're trying to change the mindset of the young people in Africa, do they think that changing the narrative of Africa may start by changing everything that we as Africans, including myself as an economist, that we have actually embraced, including the definitions of what is our lifestyle, including poverty, as living under $1 a day. My mother died at the age of 90, but the basket of food she was eating was more than $1 a day. But she was in a poverty bracket in the African context. Do we need to have our own school of thoughts in how we develop and look at indigenous medicine, indigenous thoughts, indigenous laws, indigenous schooling, and so forth? How do we move, especially my young brother from the Gambia and others? How do you think we should go back and have our own narratives, our own schools of thoughts, or how do we define poverty? How do we define, does capitalism help us in development? Because these young people here who are making money are in the form of capitalism. But we had African socialism in Tanzania, which brought that cohesion. Do we have, as moving forward in putting CFTA on the road, will we achieve this by taking the development narratives and schools of thoughts that have been ascribed to us by others?
Thank you, sir. Okay, so let me take 1 minute each, and Dr. Abu can conclude, and then we will break for lunch.
Yeah, thank you so much for that brilliant question. First, I just want to say, and also recognize the Association of African Universities, of course, and this is where we look into the intellectual contribution towards realizing the Africa that we want. In early 2000, China and Africa organized what was called the China-Africa Think Tank Forum. The purpose of this was because China had closed for many years and was joining the World Trade Organization and had already been producing substitute good, but needed to trade with the rest of the world. This think tank is what brought Chinese scholars, African scholars, to sit down and produce data. And this data today is what informs the Chinese approach towards the continent. So it is very crucial that we conduct research, that we invest in scholarly work. Our universities must turn from just lectures to solution centers that will be giving directions to both private and public sector. And for this to be enhanced, we have to build on gaining more input on the African reality, especially when it comes to data about the continent. You're very right. Whenever we want to rely on statistics about Africa, in most cases, we end up quoting organizations that are outside of the continent, whose research might be biased as well, who says living below $1 a day means poverty in Africa. In so many African societies, of course, they do not look at wealth in monetary terms. But not having a dollar doesn't equally mean that one is not able to eat. So we have a social capital. We have a lot that we need to invest in. For instance, I wouldn't mind to get up from my house in the Gambia, walk down the streets, not having a dollar, and I will still have food to eat. Because when it is time for lunch, I can enter any house in the Gambia and eat. So this is something that we need to build upon. But to do that, we must tap our intellectual, our scholar, our academics, and other groups of individuals to invest in intellectual works, to make sure that we can change the narratives from the root. And that is changing the literature about the continent and designing something fit for purpose. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're on, yeah? Okay. So I think, can you hear me?
I think so.
Yes, I think Osman is quite hit on the point. For me, I see a few gaps that needs to be bridged, and one of them falls within our continental governance. I mean, you're looking at the government playing the role of a private sector, okay? If the government is the one that is going to give a contract to the private sector, then he's taking the private sector out of his position. So he can't create any employment. When people or entrepreneurs or citizens begin to depend on the government's contract, it means that the government now has taken the role of the private sector. Those doors that are shut should be open. The government should play their role. The private sector should be able to play their role. This is how we'll be able to build industrial platforms and create jobs, and then create a subliminal wealth for society so you can create a middle income as well. Now we have a box economy. It's either the government or the poor person. And these things has to be changed to help the narratives of the way we live and politic within our nations to be able to upgrade that. And I also believe that Africa is up on a rise if we don't let our children start to manufacture our own products and sell it amongst ourselves. There will never be any unity. The Organization of Africa Unity is not going to come from politicians, it's not going to come from musicians or actors. I've just realized that
if we get a chance to trade amongst ourselves, buy the goods that we've built by ourselves, there will be a connection of unity. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that wonderful contribution from the two. You've given me two responsibilities now. So let me quickly finish with this aspect. What is it that we can do to change the narrative? Because after all, it's all a war of narratives. That's the truth. How do we change the narratives? By changing the mindset. That's where we started. And how do you go about changing the mindset? When you actually know where you're coming from. If I don't know where I'm coming from, I will lose my bearings. And if I lose my bearings, even if I know the name of where I'm going, I don't know whether to turn left or right or go forward, because I don't know where I'm coming from. So I don't know where I'm facing. Put differently, we need to get back to the historical antecedents that we have as Africans. What was it that worked in Africa before? How do we ensure? Because history, for example, who wrote the history of the Gambia? Who wrote the history of Ghana? Who wrote the history of Africa? You and I know Chancellor Williams wrote a book on, the destruction of the civilization of the black race. He put it a little differently. And he traced the history of the black man from 4,500 BC all the way to 2000 AD, though he died in 1999 towards the end. Now, when he came up, he showed clearly the things that had been happening in Africa, including the fact that the first, cesarean section, I could have gone to open heart, but let me leave cesarean section, was first performed in the Buganda Kingdom, in present-day Uganda. The scalpel that is currently being used all over the world for operations came from the same place. Now, so if I don't know where I'm coming from, I'm most likely going to be confused in terms of my bearings as to where I'm going. So that's the first comment I will make, and I hope it's clear enough that I'm saying, let's go back to our roots, because in terms of even etymology, I'm very, 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 strong on etymology. Etymology is towards like, the aspect of you going back to the origins of your family, that you normally go to your lineage and all of that. This is for words. You're going back to the root of words. Now, for etymology, the word democracy, by the way, came from two words, a compound word in Greek. It's demos and kratos. Demos is one of the three most popular words for people. And then kratos, the ruling power, derived from the maker. Meaning, then it is what has been given in trust by the maker to you, to now entrust to your representative, to ensure he is using it as somebody who will give account for the way he used it. If that were the way we looked at it, we will have the African aha. It's not, thank you, give me 5. He says not from America, because it's not from America. It's, look, the thing should be from the maker. And he says even the one we're practicing, even in America, is not from the maker. It's not from the maker. Because most of the places, please, let's stop getting deceived. America, out of all the presidents she's had, only 2 are not from the same lineage. Go and check. Because it's from Charlemagne of France and Alfred, so-called the Great of England. Go and check for yourself. So don't bring, that issue about America is practicing democracy. In fact, if you want to say democracy, but we'll leave it at that. Now, back to the aspect of the question you asked, and that's how I want to tie it in. As a former president, though I am not a former president. What would I recommend for all former presidents? That we begin to develop what I call the art of governance. A-R-T-O-F, then governance just as a word. But the others are acronym. Art of governance, A for African, R for revolutionary, T for transformative, then O for order, F for. So African revolutionary transformative order for governance, art of governance. How would we do that? When we first of all look at what were the things that were good in our African heritage that we can now begin to introduce to our democracy. That's one. Two, as former presidents, is it possible for us to now sit and look at what is it that could produce the strongest type of families? Because all the things we're talking about, including the controversial issue that was brought earlier, if we spend more time trying to build families the way they should be built, we will have a different kind of situation. Then the aspect of mindset transformation. How do we ensure that we begin to build the average African who is very strong in his mental capital, mental capacity? And I am talking of ability to think, critical, diagnostic, strategic thinking, and all of that. Then the aspect of even the governance itself. What is governance? Governance is the ability to organize people into manageable administrative units for the purpose of harnessing all the resources in a given territory for the appropriate, accurate, strategic application for the common good of all the inhabitants of the territory and the territory itself. Then the aspect of economy, harnessing all the resources and ensuring they are managed properly, not necessarily like our brother there said, using borrowed lenses. Every person, including the villagers, is an economist because they manage resources. Oikonomia, oikos, house, nemen, to manage, managing the resources of a household. Everybody here manages. So let's now see, as former presidents, how do we come together and say, sometimes hindsight is much, much better. It's 20/20 vision than foresight. Now that we have seen all the mistakes we made, how do we mentor those that are coming behind us not to make the same kinds of mistakes? Then the aspect of education, I've already talked about. The aspect of, science and technology, that's a big one. How come our scientists, our technologies are not being sponsored by people like you, the entrepreneurs, to ensure they come up with things that you're doing together in partnership to ensure that whatever you need in terms of inputs, they are manufacturing? The empowerment centers that you were referring to, where the youth are being empowered, how come our educationists, technologists, our scientists are not being encouraged by this private sector? So these former presidents can begin to harness those private sector people that they produce, like the Dangotes, because you talked about, Obasanjo. Now, let's harness them and see how they can mentor others, but also contribute to the raising of all the academia. Finally, the last two, the aspect of the media communication. How come, even in terms of our news broadcasts, we actually ensure we call each other? Please ask those who are practitioners. CNN will call BBC and say, this thing that happened, which angle are you looking at coming from? So though you have different media or communication platforms, they are most likely going to sell you what they want to sell you, not what is supposed to be. If they can be bold enough to help indigenous people to now come from an African angle to tell our stories rather than other people telling our stories for us. It will change the narratives. Finally, the aspect of the arts, sports, and culture. The dance, drama, music you were talking about. Our musicians before, every time they were actually singing, they were singing philosophical songs, trying to give direction to people, the way we ought to go, social ills being dealt with. If it came to movies, same kind of thing. If it came to the aspect that has to do with sports, you know, it was things that will help us to think of development. And finally, the culture. Let our culture be transformative and progressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I think you agree with me that the diversity of our presenters here was so helpful in bringing a balance. We had two ladies who were supposed to be part of the mix who were going to join us virtually, but we're not able to come because of the technicalities. But just to say, we will definitely ensure that some of the contributions are captured as part of our records here. But I want to thank our esteemed guests for their insightful and very courageous answers to what were really tough questions in these big conversations. And I do hope that you can really take this conversation forward in terms of where to from here. What are some of the ongoing discussions that we need to have with the view to coming up with solutions? So that said, I want to maybe ask them for our records to go up, down there rather, for our picture, and then thereafter we are dismissed for lunch. After lunch, when the technical team has assured me of capacity, then we'll start with the keynote from President Chakwera, and the rest of the program will follow suit. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do our official picture, and then we'll be dismissed for lunch. Can we shorten lunch rather, because we are trying to recover time? Are you able to do lunch in 45 minutes so we can be back at 1:45? Would that work for everybody? Thank you so much. See you at 1:45, but we'll do our picture first.
Watch out for the second edition of the Africa Private Sector Summit.